country.
I can hear nothing.
Sense of what happened.
I don't.
And then I'll discuss what we did in this reconnaissance trip and the observations that we have and the lessons that we have. And then we want to talk about
stop the video.
for that. Okay, and then talk about the observations that we have and the damage and how the country reacted in preparedness and
All right,
response
I'm
to
out of
that. We heard a little bit about that last time that we have a presentation here, but the follow-up, what happens and how they recovered from the earthquake and they are where they are today. And most importantly, what are the lessons for us here? So this is really a non-technical presentation, no questions, just reports and images that will help us understand what happened. So this is the map of the world, and you can see all these dots represent earthquake activity in the world. Okay, you have the Pacific Ring of Fire around the west coast of the American continent and going all the way to Asia. But if you go towards Europe, you see that Turkey is right in the middle of the seismic activity here. So it's a country where many earthquakes have happened in the past and have significant effect. And going closer to that, there are some number of faults in the country, and one of the important ones is the Anatolian fault, okay, which is this one here. It's called the North Anatolian fault. And then this fault system here going towards the Mediterranean is what is called the East Anatolian fault. And the earthquake was generated in this region. Istanbul, for reference, is here. Okay. And if we zoom into this area here, you see that it's a very complicated system of faults. All of these red lines represent faults that have significant activity in the country. Okay. The events that we're discussing is more than one. Okay, the first one happened early in the morning of February 6th this year. They are called the Kahramanmaraş earthquakes. Okay, and these pitch balls that you see here represent the location of the epicenter. Okay, and as you can see, the pitch ball has this black and white. It's the way that seismology is used to represent whether the fault is moving this way or is moving up and down, and etc. And when they are like that, they represent a strike slip. That means that one side of the fault is moving laterally with respect to the others. Okay. So as you can see, the first event is a 7.8 magnitude earthquake, and size is important, but more important is where exactly is that happening and how deep on Earth. And this is only 8.6 kilometers deep. And this is called a shallow earthquake. Deeper earthquakes could occur 100, 600 kilometers deep, right? So when earthquake is very shallow, the effects are going to be very destructive. Okay. So then, obviously, following a main shock, there is an aftershocks, and usually they occur maybe an hour or two, but in this case, there was another aftershock right a few minutes after that one, a magnitude 6 event, and again in a very shallow one. So it's just being hit once, and now you're being hit by a follow aftershock, and then 9 hours later, okay, another. So this occurred here, and then 9 hours later, another big one occurs, a magnitude 7.5, in a different fault. So it's not an aftershock, it's another big event, and then in between that, there was a series of events, etc. So in total, there have been about 34,000 aftershocks since then. Okay. So it's really a mess. It's really a mess.
Where the red dots are, the aftershock.
Yes, yes. All the dots represent aftershocks, and you see the faults there, and that's the problem. It was a very problematic aspect. So it would simplify what you're seeing here as the fault lines that along this fault that's where the rupture occurs and the motion. And as you can see, one is happening here and the other one is happening here. So of course, everything in the region here will be affected by that event. Okay, so again, I'm not don't want to go into detail of the seismicity, it's just to put you in context of that. So this is some pictures that we have seen before and after. Right? So this is the city of Hatay, and as you can see on the left is the city before the earthquake, right? And on the right is the city after the earthquake, and the different colors means there is a lot of destruction, and we're going to see some details, and I'm going to explain what happened. But it's just to give you a visual impact of that. It's a very dramatic video that shows what's happening. Okay. And as you can see, this is a video camera that is showing the ground moving. And whenever you're very close to the earthquake, the center of the earthquake or the fault, the vertical motion is going to be very, very severe. Okay. And as you can see, it's happening for several seconds. And you see how significant is that vertical motion. So that's what makes these earthquakes very destructive. Right? And of course, we have seen lots of videos of buildings collapsing. Okay, these are, of course, the first event happened early in the morning. There was no light, but this is during the second event, and you can see that how it is continuing to be damaging buildings, and buildings that were weakened by the first event now have been destroyed and collapsing like that. So what we wanted to understand is why these buildings collapse and what happened, and how do we prevent this from happening again. Okay, so some statistics here. Because of this complexity of motion, you see all these dots that are there are major cities. So there are 11 major cities that were affected by the earthquake. And that's essentially 160 municipalities, 1,300 villages. The total area affected by the earthquake is 100,000 kilometers. Okay. That's greater than Holland. You can imagine the whole country of Holland totally being destroyed by that. This is the extent of the area of this event. Okay. 14 million people were affected. It's the first time that we see so many in recorded history, so many people being directly affected by that event. The official number is about 60,000 people that perished that, but I think it's more than that, probably twice or three times as more, based on what we see and the destruction that we saw. Okay, and about 2.5 million buildings have been destroyed. Okay. Okay, so what is a reconnaissance trip? What do we do with that? First, I'd like to acknowledge my team. Okay, I was team leader with Professor Tony Yang from UBC and Professor Ender Bayaktar from Turkey was our local representative. And then the rest are members of our team. As you see, there are UBC people. We also have people from Italy, from Turkey, and companies here, and also some people from here, and some people from Slovenia. Okay. So it was an international team, and all of the team collaborated. We have different specialties, and this presentation is really a summary of the work by my colleagues, and I just being the spokesman for that, but I acknowledge their contribution for that. So what we did, we flew to Istanbul, it's here, and then we went to the city of Gaziantep, which is one of the cities that was east of the faults, really close to the border with Syria. And we stayed there. And Gaziantep was one city that was not significantly affected by the earthquake, so it was a relatively safe city to be there. And then from there, we took tours every day. We were there for 5 days, and each of these lines represent the routes that we follow each day, visiting all these cities that were affected. Early in the morning at 6 in the morning, travel all day and came back around 10 in the evening. We'll get some rest and repeat the same and visiting that. So very, very fast and very hectic schedule. So what we did, the first investigation of the damage affected, the damaged cities and how much was the damage. And by the time we visited there, because we were in early June and the earthquake happened in February, a number of buildings have already been demolished and removed, but still we saw a lot of destruction and things that were not, that were there as in the earthquake. These are pictures that show that. Okay, I'm going to show you, this is a video that I took as we were going through the city of Hatay. This is in the downtown area. And as you can see, this is what we saw, okay? The city was just left as, people just left the city, but this is how the city looks like today. Okay, and you see, it's interesting, some buildings look intact, and then others are partially destroyed, or you see a lot of damage there, and then total destruction of some of the buildings, as you can see there. Whatever as you see, empty lots on the right, because they have already demolished the building or removed the debris. And so this is the impact that when you do this type of trips, that this is what you're seeing, and then you have to digest all that information. And you know that there are people that were not recovered. They were buried there and they stay there. So this is just to give you an impression of that. Okay. So we also conducted an examination of the structures, and sometimes people will come and ask us to help them determine if their building was safe or not, and we were able to. We're engineers, so our job is also to provide this information to them. So we provided that support, right? And in some cases, we made recommendations of how to strengthen the building or whether the building was safe or not. So it's part of our work. We are not only there taking pictures and collecting information, we are also assisting people. Part of our work is also to do measurements. We take instruments to do field measurements to understand the soil conditions, etc., and collect that information to assess that when we come back here. And this is examples of the bottom one. We are measuring vibrations of a bridge, etc. We went into buildings and measured vibrations, and this is some engineering work that we do. We visited hospitals because it's important for us to learn what happened to hospitals and how they behave. And the visit included talking to the administration people, learning how they responded to the earthquake, what happened to their hospital, and also provide recommendations in case they ask us to do that. And we also investigated how the ground moves, and I'm going to show you some interesting examples of what happens. Here we talk about liquefaction, mostly in Richmond area and Delta. I'm going to show you what is the effect of that, but you can see some picture of this, what we call site investigations that we do as well. And then we also met every city that we visited, or the 11 cities that we visited, we met with the mayor or the building officials. We talked with them and learn how they responded to the earthquakes and the limitations and problems that they have to overcome to try to recover the city and what are their plans to in the future. Some of the cities are going to be moved to other places because the structure has been complete. Okay. And then we also have local media. So all the Canadians are here, so they decided to talk to us. And here's an example of the number of interviews that were posted on the website in Turkey, asking us for opinions, etc. So this is part of the work that we do to provide our insights on what we have seen. And most importantly, interact with the people. Right? So we went to schools, and we went to hospitals, we went to in the street, like in this picture here, I was walking on the sidewalk, and then you see there's a building that collapsed there. So I went to walk on the street, and this person on the motorcycle starts talking to me in Turkish, I don't understand. I think he was complaining that I was on the street, but he was asking me to go have tea with him. So the hospitality is amazing. Even in the areas where people were displaced from their homes, the hospitality of the Turkish people is amazing. They always invited us to have tea, so I drank as much tea as I did my whole life because that was the generosity of the people. But it was good to interact with them, and we have our interpreters, and it was very moving to learn their histories and what happened to their families, their friends, and how they were coping up with this tremendous disaster. Okay, so this is what we do in a reconnaissance trip typically. Okay, now what we observe, right? And quickly I'll summarize what we saw. Okay, so this is the city of Hatay before the earthquake, and this is after. Okay. And this is Hatay. Again, as you can see, all these empty lots are buildings were there and are gone already. Right? And here's a video of us driving into this area. Again, you see some of the buildings are still standing, but they are not being occupied because there is a lot of non-structural damage. The structure is still standing, but inside the building is a mess. Okay, and the problem is that partitions that they use in Turkey are made of brick. Okay, and they are very messy. Here we use gypsum board, plaster, and it's not as problematic. But in that case, all of these partitions, etc., are very brittle and make the building unsafe. Although structurally it's okay, but it's not safe to occupy the building. And you can see all these are residential buildings that were affected. Okay. Camaras is a very large city. Okay, and this is before, and this is after. Okay. Very, very devastating event, very close to one of the centers of the earthquakes. As you can see, this is over and over. Every city that we visited, we saw this one. So it's perhaps they have been in many countries where earthquakes have been affected, but this is the one that I have seen so much damage and so much destruction because of the complexity of the ground shaking, as you can see there. Okay. So this was repeated over and over. As you can see, this Malatia. Okay, and again, so this is structural damage. What about the ground damage? And this is what we call liquefaction and subsidence. Okay, so liquefaction also is a process where the soil or the ground becomes liquid. It's typically saturated sand. It's like if you go to the beach and you are right by the water and you shake your legs, you're going to start sinking. That's liquefaction. But now that's going to happen in a more severe way. And this is what you see. Okay. These buildings have been damaged because the foundation lost their support. Okay. Liquefaction, the soil becomes liquid, So the buildings are floating in water, pretty much. And that's what you see here. And let's see if I can show you this video that I took here. Okay, as you can see, all these buildings collapsed because of that liquefaction. Okay, and you can see these buildings are intact there. Okay, so I'm just moving the camera from one side to the other, and you can see that not all the buildings are collapsed here. Okay, and again, collapse on the right, buildings are intact on the left. So the question is why this is happening. Of course, the buildings have some structural damage, but I'm talking about this type of structural collapse. But as you can see here, these buildings are sinking, or part of that is already about half a meter or 1 meter that has sunk into the ground. The one behind has already sunk about a meter of that because the soil became very, very liquid. And these are collapsed buildings, as you can see them. Again, you can see the other side of the street looks okay. Okay, so this. Sorry.
Is this city near water?
Yes, yeah. Oops. Okay. Okay. You asked the question here. This is called Golbasi. Okay, Golbasi Lake is here, and what I was showing is the buildings in this area here were damaged by that. Okay, so I'm going to show you a video at the edge of the lake. Okay, which shows this one. Oops. Hopefully it will work. Okay, and the lake is there. Okay, you see the lake. All of this damage is because the soil liquefied. You see these buildings are relatively intact, but they have moved towards the lake because there's a sliding, and you can see how much this move away from the building, move away from the entrance here, and the building is a wreck. It's not because, again, the shaking, but because of the liquefaction, and you see all this mess stuff that we see here. And then this is about 100 meters away from the lake. You see these buildings were relatively intact. So the closer you are to the water, the more severe are the effects of liquefaction if you are in this type of zone. Okay, so why did this happen and why so many buildings were damaged? Okay. So this is if you go to the building code in Turkey, this is the map of the hazard, seismic hazard, and the red means very high seismic hazard. Okay, and again, Istanbul is here. This is the North Anatolian Fault. This is the East Anatolian Fault, and we are talking about all this region here affected by that. So according to the code, they knew that this is an area where the seismicity is very high. Turkish code is one of the most advanced codes in the world. Turkish engineers are really good, and this chart just shows you the progression of the building code since the 1920s, all the way down to current day. Okay? So they have, every time they have a major earthquake, they have improved their code. In 1999, okay, there was a very significant earthquake called the Kocaeli earthquake that affected the North Anatolian Fault. And even it was felt in Istanbul and was in the city of Izmir. And that prompted a significant, there was a lot of damage and destruction, but only in a few cities. And that prompted a big change in the building code. So since that year, all the buildings after 2000 have been designed according to their building code. So there is no question the building code is good. Okay. The question is why so many buildings collapse. Okay. Well, there are a number of reasons for that. First is that the level of shaking was very, very high. And second was that the quality of construction, although the building code is good, the quality of construction was not that great. And the code was not enforced. Okay. And that's a problem, right? You have the code, but code has to be enforced by the city officials, by the government, and that was something that was not proper. So severity of shaking, very intense. The buildings were not built as per the code per se because of shortcuts, etc. The consequence of that is catastrophic. And also because there are other engineering aspects that I'm going to discuss with you. And one is well, first is the details of construction. You can see here the damage to the concrete walls and the reinforcement being exposed. We took a piece of concrete there and you can pretty much demolish with your hand. Okay. So it should have been a rock solid and then just drop it and disintegrate. So that means that the quality of the concrete in some buildings was very poor. Okay. So the building doesn't have enough capacity to resist the shaking. Okay. Details of the reinforcement, as you can see, were not as per the code. They should have put reinforcement like this one. And as you can see, there is nothing there, and that weakens the building. Okay. And then let me see if I can have a video here. Okay, so I did something that I have never done before. We went into one of these buildings, a 13-story building that was damaged, and then we did some measurements. And on the way down, I took my 360 camera and videotaped myself going down the stairs, trying to understand what happened to the people that were living on the top of the 13-story building at 4 in the morning, trying to go down the stairs, trying to escape the building. So hopefully this will work. Yeah. Oops. This is me going down. Not working, but see what happens. It's supposed to show me going down the stairs floor by floor. Let me try to stop this and try it. It's not I'll share the video with you later on separately. I think the internet is too slow, so
Yeah.
it's not showing that, but the idea is to give you a sense of what the people experience. It's a daytime, but it was 4 in the morning, dark, maybe using the light from your smartphone to try to go down. And as you go farther down into this, the levels, the more damage is, a lot of debris on the stairs. And at the very last floor, there is a lot of pieces of concrete blocking the exit. So you have to climb over to get out. And then you went to the open area and there is a lot of glass and stuff there. So sorry, this should have worked, but I probably can show it after. Separate. Okay, so the problem is this, what we call irregularities in a building code, right? This is in Canada, we should not do this. okay, like irregularities, this change of shape on the building here, this change of the strength, or making the first floor weakened, like put a commercial area there, and then you have the floors above are residential construction. And we saw a lot of that in the cities that we visited. And of course, when you have this type of behavior, then the consequence is that. So once you start seeing inside, it's obvious that many buildings collapse. Again, in addition to the severe ground motion, poor quality of construction, and now some deficiencies in the design to make these floors weaker than they should have been. And then the building has no capacity to resist all this shaking that they were exposed to. Okay. See if I can move this thing. I think this is one of these annoying things of Zoom. Okay, where is that? All right. Schools. Okay, one of the projects that we have at UBC with Association of Structural Professional Engineers of BC is the retrofit of the public schools, working with the Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Education. Sorry. And so we were interested in see how the schools behave. And we knew that many of the schools in Turkey have been retrofitted over the years, and we wanted to understand how those retrofits work. Okay. And we saw good things and we saw not so good things. And it's interesting when they say, oh, the school has been retrofitted. But for us, retrofit means structural strengthening. For some of them, retrofit means just fixing, just providing a new facade or envelope of the building. And the consequence of that, as we saw damage, but they told us the building has been retrofitted, so we understood better what it does. So here's an example of one of the schools. Okay, we have 1,800 schools damaged. Okay, 637 partially damaged, and about 17,000 with minor damage. Remember, we are covering an area of 100,000 kilometers, so we're seeing lots of schools there. Okay, but we also saw good cases. Okay, here's a school in the middle of nowhere. It's in the mountains. Okay, and when we arrived there, the whole village was destroyed, but the school buildings were intact. Okay, they only have minor damage, and it happens that government buildings fare very, very well throughout the earthquake. Okay, private buildings didn't do well, but government buildings are designed properly. They have proper supervision, proper quality of materials, and most of those buildings didn't have any damage and survived very well. Okay. So this is cool that we met with the children, and it was very nice to interact with them, but the village was destroyed, and that was really a big contract by seeing that compared to other cases. And right, using gyms as a refuge for shelters. Here's an example in Osmania. As you can see, the school building looks pretty good. A little damaged, but the school was in operation already. But after the earthquake, they used the gym, as you can see in the right, as a shelter, and people came there and they stayed there. The principal and the teachers were really amazing, helping people and coordinating food for them. So what people will do is, in the morning, they will go to the village to work, etc. In the evening, they will come and stay and sleep there. And they did it for a number of weeks. This was in the middle of the winter. So they have shelter, they have food. The school principal and the teachers really committed themselves to make people comfortable and give them support, especially for the ones who lost family members, etc. So this here is an example of how things should be. Okay, school gyms are properly designed, and they were fantastic in helping people go through these first few days of the emergency. Hospitals, okay. Okay, hospitals, we have a number of hospitals that didn't do very well. The hospital is in Nurdaji. Okay, as you can see, the hospital is a mess. Structurally, the structure is still standing there, but when you go inside, everything is all over the place. So you lose all the beds in the hospital. Okay. So very important city, very important hospital, totally useless.
What is fixed base?
Yeah, I'll tell you in a moment. Fixed base means you build a building attached to the ground. Okay, now, and that's why I call it fixed base, because there is a concept called base isolation. Okay, and base isolation is the idea to separate the structure from the ground by putting a layer of certain material or devices. Okay, and we call that, I call it fixed base and base isolation. Base isolation is a technology that has been available for many years. It's being used extensively for hospitals because it allows the hospital to perform well when the shaking is very severe. Okay. In California, the law says that all hospitals in California should be base isolated. Here in Canada, the building code allows for this technology to do that, but we only have a couple of buildings here in downtown in Vancouver that are base isolated. One of the schools has been retrofitted with base isolation, etc. So, but the idea is to see this technology works well. So let me explain what it is. This cartoon shows the building on your left is on a fixed base, and the building on the right is on this base isolation. It's like the suspension on your car and the shock absorbers. And you go, as you can see, that fixed base building is going to shake a lot, and a base isolated building is not going to shake because this motion is being absorbed by these devices. But it has to be done properly, because if it's not done properly, instead of helping the building, you're going to damage them. And here's this is the hospital, is base isolated in Latvia, and here's the video that somebody took. As you can see, the ground is shaking, and here's the isolation level. And if you notice that the building is still moving, but in a very gentle manner. It's not moving severely, such that it's going to cause that much damage. So if it's well done, it works very well. Okay, and here's a detail of that. This is Jeff, one of our engineers, hugging the column, so you can see the size of that. Okay, and the device is, in this case, looks like two plates with a device that allows these two plates to slide with respect to each other. So this is it's called friction pendule isolator, and there are other technologies. So many of those hospitals were subjected to severe shaking, but some of the base isolated hospitals also have some damage because some mistakes in building the base isolation system. There should be a gap around the building entrance to allow the building to move and don't hit the retaining walls. And they didn't do that. Or they filled the gap with gravel. So defeat the purpose. Okay, and they have damage. But it was only a couple of hospitals. The majority of them behaved as expected. Okay, so some statistics. How many buildings were affected by that? And this is just the construction over the years. Okay, has been improved. As you can see, the majority of that is the blue one means reinforced concrete. Okay, so reinforced concrete is the most prevalent material. in Turkey and in many countries. And of course, here, our homes are made of wood, but all the rest of the buildings are made of concrete. And the second chart shows that the majority of the buildings are residential buildings. That's why the impact in society has been very great, because the majority of those buildings that collapsed were residential buildings. Okay. How many buildings? Okay. Number of severely damaged, 518,000. Okay. And damaged housing, 131,000 further to damage, and likely damage about 1.3 million. Well, we're talking about huge numbers in this case, affecting that. Okay. Healthcare facilities. Okay. The damage to the buildings, because of many of those were not in base isolation, was very prevalent. And the orange part of the pie chart means that the non-structural damage was prevalent. And what is the non-structural damage? Ceiling tiles, doors, air conditioning, gas systems, electrical, everything that is necessary for the building to function, but not necessarily to provide the structural capacity. So we call that non-structural system, and is perhaps the most expensive part. If this building is damaged by an earthquake and we have a lot of non-structural, about 75% of the cost of repair will be the non-structural, and 25% the structural part. So it's very important to be sure that we protect the non-structural components in the building. Okay. What is the cost of this earthquake? The bottom line is $104 billion, which is about 9% of the GDP of the country this day. $12.9 billion in deconstructing. So it's huge numbers. For reference, you remember the earthquake in Japan in 2011, the big one that affected that. The cost of that earthquake was about $300 billion in that. So, and this is one of these big losses that we are seeing here. Okay, preparedness and response. I think this is very important for us in here to start thinking what we learned and from this earthquake. Okay, the response, immediate response took a while. Okay, I think we talked about this at the last presentation. In the 1999 earthquake in Coachella, the army was able to respond right away, and they provided a lot of help, and that helped minimize the effect of the earthquake in that time. This time, the army was not allowed to go right away, and that caused a lot of problems. In some of the cities, they were totally isolated. The airport was damaged, the highways were damaged, and they had to fend on themselves for 2 or 3 days before any aid was being able to develop them. The army could not go as well, which could have helped them a lot. So it took some time to start with responding to the emergency. Okay, and the first 2 months were really chaotic in there until things were being able to get organized. Okay. Then people, remember, it's the middle of the winter, so tents were being provided for people that at least stay temporarily, and shelters were provided. Then containers were provided for people. These containers are the regular containers that's for transportation. The European community donated lots of them. There were about 35,000 or more. And here's an example of what a container has been modified. It's essentially a house there. On the right, you'll have the kitchen area. In the middle, you have the bathroom and facilities. And on the left, you will have a room where 6 people were sleeping. And those are stacked over and over. And I'll talk more about that, but this is the prevalent shelter that is being provided. Of course, the containers have been insulated, so they are okay for the water. So here are some pictures of how the amount of containers that have been provided. At the same time, the construction has been started. Of course, there is an effort to make construction safer. They are using what is called the tunnel construction. The tunnel construction is they put the formwork all together and then they put the concrete on top of that. And then once this is ready, they pull out the formwork and it's like building a tunnel and they move it to the next floor. And that makes it for a much more efficient construction and safer than the one that they had before. So these are efforts going, but I think that people are going to be in these containers for the next 2 or 3 years because there's so much construction that it's going to take a long, long time, although they are working very hard to do that. The amount of debris is amazing, right? You can imagine all these collapses, or as you are driving along the highways, you see these piles of concrete and debris, and they are trying to recycle. They have people there separating the rebar from the concrete. The rebar is being reused, and the concrete is being used to recycle. But this is millions of tons of debris that is spread out all the area there. Okay, so the issues that were important: airports were damaged, or runways were damaged. Typically, they had to be repaired, so the airplanes could, with emergency supplies, etc., could have to wait until the runway was fixed. Okay. So in accessibility, the region is very mountainous region, so access to that was very difficult. If the highways were damaged, the highways had to be repaired, etc. Okay. So the distribution of goods, water, food, etc., was complicated because of the complexity of the region there. Okay. Turkey has a very good method to assess the damage. We have talked about it here when we invited Easy Housing to do the inspection. They have a very advanced method to inspect their buildings and very more accurate, more refined than what we have. The ministry, the government send a number of engineers from Istanbul to do these inspections, and they have to inspect about 400,000 buildings in about a month to determine if the building was safe to occupy or could be repaired or will have to be demolished. Right? And in this picture that I show, those buildings were going to be demolished. They were still okay, but they decided to demolish there because people didn't want to go there. Period. I will not want to go there either. So this is the process that they follow. You have to identify the level of damage, okay? Slightly damaged, moderately damaged, all the way to collapse. So if the building is on the first two on damage or slightly damaged, you can expect to have it repaired. Insurance companies will provide support for that. Moderately damaged, again, is a decision of whether you can afford to repair that, or the owner, or they will just write it off, and the other ones need to be demolished. Okay. The damage assessment again includes what is called the exterior damage and the interior damage. Okay. And the interior damage is really to determine if there is structural damage or how the extent of the non-structural damage. And that's examples. You cannot read it here, but they have a very simple form that engineers and inspectors fill up. So, but they have to go inside the building if the building is safe. And they have to go room by room and fill this form to assess what is happening. And then, based on what they see in the whole building, they determine if the building is safe or not. We don't do that here. Our inspection is more faster in visual inspection. They do a very detailed inspection with a very defined protocol on that. So what's happening now? Okay, as you see, people are trying to go back to normal life, but it's going to take a long time. Buildings will have to be rebuilt. Cities are going to be abandoned or moved to other places. For example, here is a system of building these houses with steel studs instead of wood studs that we use here. And in 20 days, they can build a house, 100 square meter house. Okay, and the village is behind on the background there, was totally destroyed. So they were really moving the village to this area in these houses that would accommodate all these people, and they were trying to do it as fast as possible. Okay. The community still providing support for people. The municipalities were providing meals and support, psychological support and transportation, etc. So this is part of the recovery process. But this is my plan is to go perhaps next year again, visit that, and find out what's a recovery process. This is important for us. Okay, home life right now has been disrupted. People are living in these containers, so they have to adapt to that. And also, these containers have been used for businesses. Schools, the ones that have been damaged, they have temporary shelters, temporary school built on the school grounds, so children cannot go back to school and try to start normal life there. Okay. And here's an example of a container in here that this used to be a building with shops on the first floor. Okay, so the containers now are the shops. They have windows, open windows that people can open their business to sell whatever they want to sell. This is what they are doing. So finally, what are the important lessons for us? Okay, from the engineering point of view, the ground shaking was extremely severe. The fact that we have two major earthquakes within 9 hours of each other and lots of aftershocks is very unprecedented. So it's big lessons to learn for us in engineering. Okay. The fact of being the cities being near the fault. Okay, the closer you are to the fault, the more severe is the shaking. The farther you are, the less shaking. But most of those cities were right along the fault, where the shaking was most severe. Okay, the earthquake being shallow resulted in more damage as well. The shaking lasted for a long time. That's another problem, that it's going to shake for a minute or so. That has a significant effect. Okay, force rupture for a long distance. Okay, as you saw in the pictures there, and liquefaction was very prevalent and widespread in many areas. Okay. From the education sector, okay, there were many schools that have been retrofitted, but not all of them. Many schools were damaged, as you saw, and that impacted the education aspect of that. Gyms were the ideal shelter. It's the gym was designed for that. Okay, has been used in the past. It's going to be used again. Okay, and the children. Oh, that's important. Here we do the shake-up VC once a year. Right? There they do it 4 times. Okay, in the schools they do it 4 times. The training, so the children are more aware of that. So it's a big difference for us. Okay, so as you already said, 11 major cities were affected by that. I would say more than 100,000 people lost their lives. Okay, lots of buildings were damaged, and about 58,000 are yet to be demolished. Okay, the significant losses are very high. Okay, and the insurance is going to pay a lot. for that. Okay. Finally, I would like to summarize that what is important for us here in BC. Okay, um, land and land use planning is important. Okay, for example, North Van has very good plans for land using because they have the problem with the slopes there, fires, uh, landslides, earthquakes, etc. So land use planning is very important. Okay. The social support to communities, we were discussing that earlier in the meeting today. What should be important? Education, going on. Third one, educate engineers and in the industry for contractors and constructor workers, etc., on what's important, how this construction should be made, because a building code itself is not enough. It has to be enforced properly and implemented properly. Okay. Quality control of materials is always very important. Infrastructure support is critical. We know that we have Ministry of Transportation is concerned about the bridges and highways. They're working on that. Ministry of Health is trying to improve the hospitals, although we're not there yet, but Ministry of Education is working on the schools, etc. So we need to strengthen the infrastructure because it's going to be critical for this. Okay. Exercises to like what we do here in LEAP is important. Preparedness is to, at least to know what we do and how we should respond in case of that. So with that, that's all, and hopefully that was useful to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for sharing your experience and knowledge. We have time for a couple questions, and then we have to clear the room to be out of here by 8:30. So, Chris?
What happened with the army? Why were they absent?
Well, it was election period in Turkey at that time. And the government was slow in allowing the army to go and help. Right? Eventually they were there, but not at the critical moment. Yeah, in the city of Skellingdon, they were totally isolated for 4 days. That's at the south end of the forts, and they have to bend over by themselves for that time until help came. It was political.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a political issue.
Okay.
So from what I understand, Nicolas, there was some specialized codes for the hospital, right? There were specialized codes to put the hospital on some kind of emergency basis. But you saw 2 different types of patterns. You saw the schools seem to be better built, and then there were, despite the strict code for residential buildings and apartment blocks, they still did not survive. And I think you're suggesting that the code was better enforced in the schools than in the private construction industry. Is that right? It's the same code, but they didn't have inspection systems like we have. Is that
Yeah, because it's institutional things, right? Anything that was government owned was better built. Like when we went visit the municipalities, the building was there and there was total destruction around that because the codes were the same, but they were properly enforced.
So did the places that survived, was it an inspection system similar to the one we have, and it just wasn't sent out to the private industry?
Yeah, well, there is something interesting there that I was told that the developers of these buildings, by law, they have to have, when they commission the design of a building, they should have a peer review process.
Yep.
The problem was that the peer review company was owned by the developer.
So similar to the type of sign-off we've sent to the private design professionals here, except that private design professionals are all one company.
Yes, yeah. So I'm not saying that happened everywhere, but that was one of the problems that the major developers of these buildings, in fact, some of these buildings that were rated to be safe, etc., and they collapsed completely the report was that the company owned the peer review company. And also they have, the government was providing allowances to exempt some companies from doing seismic design.
Right.
But there were too many.
But based on the buildings that survived, did we learn something about good code for building on fault lines? I mean, would you recommend they continue to build on those fault lines if they enforce the code?
Yeah, well, the problem is that in Turkey, they know where their faults are. Okay,
Right.
so, these are cities that are hundreds of years or thousands of years. So you cannot do much, right? If you know that you have a fault line in California, they have laws that said how far you have to build from the known fault line. Is the field act or something like that? I don't remember. Here we don't know where are the faults. Okay, we know that there are some faults, like one we have in Chilliwack. Okay, there is one that is known there, but there are other faults that we don't know if they're active or not. So it's very problematic to build in the areas because we don't know if there is a fault there or not. The faults are not in the surface; they will be 10, 20 kilometers below the surface. So it's very difficult. But to answer the question, yes, properly designed buildings should behave well near the fault. But if you know that they are near the fault, you will make the building much stronger. The shaking will be more secure.
Staying on the code for a minute, is the emphasis in the building code on survival of the people that are in the building? Or is the emphasis on preserving the building?
Excellent question. I am part of the committee on the National Building Code that deals with that. And the philosophy of the code today, the National Building Code, the 2025 edition, the 2020 edition, that is the official edition, the philosophy is to protect your life. Means that as an engineer, I will design a building, and I have to be sure that if there is a severe earthquake, you're safe and you can walk out of the building. Your building will be a mess. This is changing now based on that. And the philosophy is going to change now. The bridge code has already changed, but the building code not. And this is called performance-based design, which will be, I want to protect you, and I want to protect your building if you want me to. If you want to have a building where you are safe only, the performance will be just to protect your life. If you want to protect your building as well, then the performance will be to achieve all the levels. And that's where we are going, but we're not there yet. So right now, all the buildings that we have across the country are designed to protect your life, but the buildings will be a mess. Probably we have to be demolished, but that's reality. And this politics is changing.
You mentioned that we have one school that has the floating foundation.
Yeah.
Which one?
What's this called? Past on Broadway, past Main. It's one of the.
Oh, like the industrial school or
Britannia,
Fantech.
Fantech?
Bantech. Bantech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. If you go there, you'll go there. What they did is they cut the top of the first floor columns, and they inserted this isolated. Yeah. So they protect because it's a heritage building.
Yeah.
So you don't see the facade changing, etc. But if you go there, you're going to see that all the columns have been cut and they have this sandwich with this base isolation system. Bridges, yeah.
And they've recently improved the decks, the bridges that have that moving.
Yeah. If you see that in Queensboro Bridge,
Thank
in New West, when you're driving, you're going to see that it was retrofitted about 20 years ago. And they put this chunk of rubber. So it works.
What about the new hospital that's going up, the new thing, all hospital?
That's-
It will be on a floating base, on a,
No,
isolated base.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, yeah, that's-
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
the liquefaction was assessed by, we call that remediation, that you can change the characteristics of the soil to minimize liquefaction. And that's all done in Richmond as well,
Richmond,
where you see these big amounts of
Sand.
sand for a couple of years or so, and then the building is built. So there's a way to minimize liquefaction. The new hospital, unfortunately, is not on base isolation, but there are others that are being at least considered. It's not our culture here to base isolation. Our engineers have been very conservative, and because the building code did not include provisions for that until 2015. And that takes time to educate engineers and make them comfortable with the technology. So,
Thank you very much, Carlos. And thank you, everyone, for showing up. There's some handles here if you're interested. And once again, thank you very much. Next month, we're going to do a presentation on the bid on that neighborhood and preparing grab and go kits. So.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.